Hi everyone, welcome back to Goodnight Stories. My name is Lyra, and I will be your guide into whatever book we decide to read tonight. From young readers to young adult novels, my hope is to give you a comfortable space to listen to a story. So, sit back, relax, grab a cup of tea. Tonight we jump back into Erin Hunter's A Dangerous Path, the 5th book in the original Warriors series. Chapter 14. When Fireheart returned to the clearing, there was still no sign of Ravenpaw. His belly churned. The moon was high in the sky. Before long, Bluestar would lead her warriors into battle against WindClan, and all hope of a peaceful solution would be lost. Where was Ravenpaw? Perhaps One Whisker hadn't been able to find him. Or perhaps he couldn't come, or he was on his way but would arrive too late. Fireheart wanted to dash out into the forest and look for him, but he knew that would serve no purpose. Then he saw a flicker of movement at the entrance to the camp and heard a mew challenged from Ashpaw. Another cat answered, and Fireheart shivered with relief as he recognized Ravenpaw's voice. Springing forward, he bounded across the clearing. "Okay, Ashpaw," he meowed to the apprentice. "I'll look after Ravenpaw. You stay on guard." He touched noses with the sleek cat who emerged from the gorse tunnel. "It's good to see you, Ravenpaw. How are you?" Even as he asked the question, he could see that the former apprentice was looking well. His black pelt shone in the moonlight, and his strong muscles rippled beneath his fur. "I'm fine," Ravenpaw replied. He looked around the clearing, his amber eyes very wide. "It seems strange to be here again, Fireheart. I'm sorry to hear you're having trouble with WindClan. One Whisker told me everything, and he swore they haven't been stealing prey." "Try convincing Bluestar of that," Fireheart meowed grimly. "Look, I hate to rush you. I know you must have run like the wind to get here so fast, but we don't have much time. Follow me." He led the way to Bluestar's den. The ThunderClan leader was curled in her nest, but when Fireheart looked closely at her, he could see a gleam of moonlight reflected from her narrowed eyes. She was not asleep. "What's the matter, Fireheart?" she asked, sounding annoyed. "It's not time to go yet, and who's that with you?" "It's Ravenpaw, Bluestar." The loner meowed, stepping forward. "I've come with a message from WindClan." "WindClan?" Bluestar sprang to her paws. "What does that clan of thieves want to say to me?" To Ravenpaw's credit, he didn't flinch, though Fireheart knew he must remember the days when he was a clan apprentice, and Bluestar's anger was something to be feared. "Tallstar wants to meet with you, to discuss the loss of prey," he told her. "Does he?" Briefly, Bluestar glared at her deputy, her eyes blazing with blue fire. For a heartbeat, Fireheart was sure she had guessed what he had done. There was an ominous pause. "Bluestar, surely it would be better to talk than fight," he ventured. "Don't tell me what to do," Bluestar snapped. Her tail tip twitched irritably. "Get out of here. Ravenpaw and I will discuss this together." Fireheart had no choice but to leave the den. He hovered around outside, listening to the murmur of voices, but unable to make out what Bluestar and Ravenpaw were saying. After a while, Whitestorm emerged from the warrior's den and padded over to join him. "The moon's going down," the white warrior meowed. "Bluestar will want to leave soon. Is Ravenpaw here yet?" "Yes, he is," mewed Fireheart. "But I don't know whether—" He broke off at a movement from inside the den. A heartbeat later, Bluestar stalked out with Ravenpaw behind her. She paced forward until she reached Fireheart, her tail lashing. "Gather a patrol," she ordered. "We go to Four Trees." "Does that mean you are going to talk with Tallstar?" Fireheart asked bravely. His leader's tail lashed again. "I will talk," she meowed. "But if there is no agreement, then we will fight." The night was still dark when Bluestar led her warriors into the hollow where the 4 great oaks stood. Fireheart patted at her shoulder. The smallest of rustles told him that the other cats were following. His heart lurched as an owl hooted in the distance. He had barely had a chance to murmur his thanks to Ravenpaw for bringing Tallstar's message before the black cat had slipped away from the ThunderClan warriors. He would follow a different route back to his farmland home, keeping well clear of Four Trees. Bluestar paused at the top of the slope. As the other warriors caught up with her, starlight cast a faint sheen on their fur, touching their pricked ears and reflecting from their wide eyes. Fireheart could almost taste their anticipation. When he looked across the border into WindClan territory, he thought at first that the sweep of moorland was empty, stretching up to the night sky. Wind swept across it and rustled the oak trees in the hollow behind him. Then he caught sight of movement up ahead, and he realized that a line of cats was standing there, with Tallstar at its center. His stomach clenched as Fireheart realized that Tallstar, too, had brought his warriors with him. "What's that?" Bluestar hissed, turning to glare into his eyes. "So many WindClan cats. I thought I was coming here to talk." Her eyes glared furiously at Fireheart, some sharpened instinct flooding her expression with understanding. "This looks more like an ambush than a meeting of leaders." At a flick of her tail, the ThunderClan warriors moved up in purposeful silence to form a tight line on either side of their leader, facing the WindClan cats. Fireheart felt the air crackle with tension, and he realized that it would be all too easy for fighting to break out, even if WindClan did not attack first. Would Tallstar keep his word, and try to talk to Bluestar rather than fight? "Tallstar," Bluestar meowed coldly, "what have you to say to me?" Waiting for the WindClan leader's response, Fireheart nervously sheathed and unsheathed his claws. He did not know if the line would hold. If just one cat moved forward, battle could engulf them all. He saw Dustbelt exchange a tense glance with Brindleface, as if both cats were thinking the same as he was. Next to him, Sandstorm kept her gaze fixed on the WindClan cats, her ears flat to her head. Swiftpaw stared nervously at his leader, but he had held his place in line. Cloudpaw, on Fireheart's other side, had dropped into the hunter's crouch, his rump wriggling as if he were about to spring. "Keep still," Fireheart hissed. A few fox lengths away, Tallstar stood a pace or two ahead of his own warriors. As the first pale light of dawn crept into the sky, Fireheart could make him out more clearly. His black and white fur was fluffed up, and his tail held erect. Behind him, Fireheart spotted One Whisker in Morning Flower, and the young apprentice Gorsepaw. "I don't want to fight these cats," he thought. He waited, feeling his heart pound like that of a trapped bird. "No cat is to move," Tallstar ordered his warriors at last, his voice carrying easily in the still air. "You must be mad." That was Mudclaw, padding to Tallstar's side. "That's a fighting force she's brought with her. We've got to attack." "No." Tallstar took another pace forward, flicking his tail to summon Deadfoot, his deputy, to his side. Looking directly at Bluestar, he dipped his head. "No battle will be fought here today. I said that I would come here to talk, and that's what I intend to do." Bluestar did not respond. She crouched on the ground, her fur bristling and her teeth bared in a snarl of defiance. Fireheart was suddenly afraid that she had changed her mind, and wondered what would happen if she launched herself at the WindClan leader. He sent up a fervent prayer to StarClan that she would not order her warriors to attack. Meanwhile, One Whisker came up to Mudclaw and nudged him roughly back into line. For a moment that seemed to Fireheart to last several moons, the two lines of cats faced each other, their fur blowing in the wind, their eyes gleaming with a tension that teetered on the brink of breaking out into a squalling, biting rage. "Bluestar," Tallstar spoke again, "will you come here to me, between our warriors? Bring your deputy with you, and let us see if we can make peace." "Peace?" Bluestar spat. "How can I make peace with prey-stealers and rogues?" Yowls of protest rose from the WindClan cats. Mudclaw sprang forward, but One Whisker leapt after him and bowled him over, holding him writhing on the turf. Fireheart saw Darkstripe lashing his tail to and fro. If Mudclaw attacked, Darkstripe would meet him, and all hope of peace would be over. "Do as Tallstar says," Fireheart mewed desperately to Bluestar. "That's why we're here. WindClan have suffered from stolen prey, just like ThunderClan." Bluestar rounded on him, a look of venomous hatred blazing in her blue eyes. "It seems we have no choice," she hissed at him. "But there'll be reckoning for this, Fireheart. You can be sure of that." Stiff-legged, her fur bristling, she paced forward until she stood in front of Tallstar, right on the border of WindClan territory. Fireheart followed, murmuring to Sandstorm, "Keep an eye on Darkstripe," as he left the line of warriors. Tallstar watched Bluestar coolly as she approached. The WindClan leader had never forgiven her Fireheart knew, for sheltering his old enemy Broken Tail, but he had the wisdom not to let his grudge influence him now. Bluestar, he meowed. I swear by StarClan that WindClan has not hunted on your territory. StarClan, Bluestar sneered. What's the worth of an oath by StarClan? The black and white Tom looked taken aback, his gaze flickering to Fireheart, as if he were looking for an explanation. Then I will swear it by anything you hold sacred, he went on. By our kits, by our hopes for our clans, by our honor as leaders, WindClan did not do what you accuse us of. For the first time his words seemed to reach Bluestar. Fireheart saw her fur begin to lie flat. How can I believe you? She rasped. We have lost prey too, Tallstar told her. It may be dogs or rogues, but it is not from WindClan. So you say, meowed Bluestar. She sounded uncertain now. Fireheart thought that perhaps Tallstar was beginning to convince her, but she did not know how to back down without losing dignity. Bluestar, Fireheart mewed urgently. A noble leader doesn't take her warriors into battle without need. If there's the least doubt that... Do you think you know more than I do about how to lead a clan? Bluestar interrupted. Her fur had bristled again, but this time it was Fireheart who was the target of her anger. He caught a glimpse of the old, formidable late ThunderClan leader, and it was all he could do not to flinch from her. Young cats think they know everything, Tallstar meowed. There was a hint of sympathetic humor in his voice, and Fireheart felt a flash of gratitude toward the WindClan leader for his sensitivity to Bluestar's fears. But sometimes we have to listen to them. There is no need for this battle. Bluestar's ears twitched irritably. Very well, she mewed reluctantly. I accept your word, for now, but if my patrols sent WindClan one tail length over our border... She whipped around and called to the ThunderClan cats. Back to camp, she ordered, leaping ahead of them. As Fireheart turned to follow her, Tallstar dipped his head to him. Thank you, Fireheart. You did well, and my clan honors your courage in averting this battle. But I don't envy you now. Fireheart shrugged and followed the rest of his clan. Just before he plunged into the hollow at Four Trees, he glanced over his shoulder to see the WindClan cats racing back across the open moor toward their camp. The turf gleamed pale in the soft dawn light, unstained by the blood of any cat. Thank you, Spotted Leaf, Fireheart murmured as he turned away. Bluestar led her warriors back to camp in tense silence. At the entrance to the clearing, Fireheart bounded ahead to talk to Mousefur, who was sitting outside the warrior's den. Any problems, he asked. Mousefur shook her head. No trouble at all, she reported. Frostfur has taken out the dawn patrol with Brackenfur and a couple of the apprentices. Looking over, she added, You don't seem to be missing any fur. I suppose the peace talk worked? Yes, it did. Thanks for taking care of things here, Mousefur. Mousefur dipped her head. I'm going to get some sleep, she meowed. You'll need to send some cats out to hunt. There's hardly any Frischkill left. I'll lead the hunting party. Fireheart promised. No, you won't. Bluestar came padding up behind him. Her eyes were chips of blue ice. I want to see you in my den, Fireheart. Now. She stalked across the clearing without looking back to see if he was following. Fireheart's fur prickled with dread. He had expected some sort of recrimination from his leader, but that didn't make it any easier, now that it was about to happen. I'll see to the hunting party, Whitestorm meowed, giving him a sympathetic look as he came up with Sandstorm and Dustpelt. Fireheart nodded his thanks and headed towards Bluestar's den. By the time he reached it, his leader was seated on her bedding with her paws tucked under her. The tip of her tail twitched back and forth. Fireheart? Her voice was quiet. Fireheart would have to be less afraid if she had yelled at him. Tallstar couldn't have picked a more convenient time to talk to me about the prey theft than if StarClan had told him themselves. That was your doing, wasn't it? You're the only cat who knew that I was planning to attack WindClan. Only you could have betrayed us. She sounded as if her mind was clearer than it had been for some time, as if the instinct that had sharpened her senses on the moor had settled into her hard certainty. She was behaving like the noble leader he had once respected, giving Fireheart an even more agonizing sense of what they had lost. He still believed that he had not betrayed his clan, but he had given away the advantage of surprise, because Tallstar had been wise enough to realize that battle must be close. Would Bluestar send him into exile? Fireheart shivered at the thought of being forced to live as a rogue, stealing prey and with no clan to call his own. He came to stand in front of Bluestar and dipped his head. I thought it was the right thing to do, he meowed quietly. Neither of the clans needed to fight this battle. I trusted you, Fireheart, Bluestar rasped. You, out of all my warriors. Fireheart forced himself to meet her flinty gaze. I did it for the good of the clan, Bluestar, and I didn't tell him about the attack. I only asked him to try making peace. I thought... Silence, Bluestar hissed, lashing her tail. That is no excuse, and why should I care if the whole clan had been slaughtered? Why should I care what happens to traitors? A wild light was growing in her eyes again, and Fireheart realized that the moment's clarity had gone. If only I'd kept my kits, she whispered. Mistyfoot and Stonefur are noble cats, far nobler than any of this ragtag bunch in ThunderClan. My children would never have betrayed me. Bluestar, Fireheart tried to interrupt, but she ignored him. I gave them up to become deputy, and now StarClan are punishing me. StarClan are clever, Fireheart. They know the cruelest way to break me. They made me leader and then let my cats betray me. What is it worth now to be a leader of ThunderClan? Nothing. It's all empty. All. Her paws worked furiously amongst the moss. Her eyes glazed, staring at nothing, and her mouth gaped in a soundless wail. Fireheart shuddered in dismay. I'll fetch Cinderpelt, he meowed. Stay where you are. Each word was rasped out separately. I need to punish you, Fireheart. Tell me a good punishment for a traitor. Nearly sick with fear and shock, Fireheart forced himself to reply. I don't know, Bluestar, but I do. Now her voice was a low purr, with a strange note of amusement in it, her gaze locked with Fireheart's. I know the best punishment of all. I'll do nothing. I'll let you be deputy still, and leader after me. Oh, and that should please StarClan, a traitor leading a clan of traitors. May they give you joy of it. Fireheart, now get out of my sight. The last words were spat out. Fireheart backed away from her into the clearing. He felt as if he had been in a battle after all. Bluestar's despair pierced him like sharpened claws, but he couldn't help feeling that Bluestar had let him down too, by not even trying to understand his motives. She had labeled him a traitor without even considering what would happen if they had fought WindClan. Head down, Fireheart padded across the clearing, not even aware that another cat had approached him until he heard Sandstorm's voice. What happened, Fireheart? Has she sent you away? Fireheart looked up. Sandstorm's green eyes were anxious, though she did not move close enough to comfort him with her touch. No, he replied. She didn't do anything. Then that's all right? Sandstorm sounded as if she were forcing optimism into her voice. Why are you looking like that? She's ill. Fireheart couldn't begin to describe what he had just witnessed in Bluestar's den. I'm going to get Cinderpelt to see her, then maybe we can eat together. No, I said I'd go hunting with Cloudpaw and Brindleface, Sandstorm scuffled, her front paws not looking at him. Don't worry about Bluestar, Fireheart. She'll be all right. I don't know. Fireheart couldn't repress a shiver. I thought I could make her understand, but she thinks I betrayed her. Sandstorm said nothing. Fireheart saw her give him a quick glance and then look away. There was longing in her eyes, but it was mingled with uneasiness, and he remembered how she had resented deceiving Bluestar. Does Sandstorm think I'm a traitor too? He thought desperately. After Fireheart had sent Cinderpelt to Bluestar, he headed for the warrior's den. He felt as if his legs could hardly hold him up, and he could think of nothing except sinking into the soft darkness of sleep. His heart sank when he saw Longtail stalking across the clearing toward him. I want a word with you, Fireheart, he growled. Fireheart sat down. What is it? You ordered my apprentice to go with you this morning. Yes, and I told you why. He didn't like that, but he did his duty, Longtail meowed harshly. That was true, Fireheart reflected. He had admired the apprentice's courage in a tough situation, but he wasn't sure why Longtail was making such a fuss now. I think it's time he was made a warrior, Longtail went on. In fact, Fireheart, he should have been a warrior a long time ago. Yes, I know, Fireheart replied. You're right, Longtail, he should. Longtail looked taken aback at his ready agreement. So what are you going to do about it? He blustered. Right now, nothing, Fireheart meowed. Don't flatten your ears at me, Longtail. Just think, will you? Bluestar is distressed at the moment. She didn't like what happened this morning, and she won't want to think about promoting apprentices. No, wait. He flicked his tail to silence Longtail as the pale warrior opened his mouth to protest. Leave it with me. Sooner or later, Bluestar has to realize that what happened was for the best. Then I'll talk to her about making Swiftpaw a warrior, I promise. Longtail sniffed. Fireheart could see he wasn't happy, but he couldn't think of any reason to object. All right, the pale tabby warrior mewed, but it had better be soon. He stalked off again, leaving Fireheart to head for his nest. As he curled into the soft moss, shutting his eyes tight against the early morning light, he couldn't help worrying about the 4 older apprentices. Cloudpaw, Brightpaw, and Thornpaw all deserved to be warriors as well as Swiftpaw. And the clan desperately needed them to take on full warrior duties. But in her present mood, convinced that she was surrounded by traitors, Bluestar would never agree to give them warrior status. Fireheart's dreams were dark and confused, and he woke to find that a cat was nudging him. A voice meowed. Wake up, Fireheart. Blinking, he focused his eyes on Cinderpelt's face. Her gray fur was ruffled, and her eyes wide with anxiety. Fireheart was awake in a heartbeat. What's the matter? It's Bluestar, Cinderpelt replied. I can't find her anywhere. Fireheart sprang to his paws. Tell me what happened. When I saw her earlier this morning, I took her poppy seeds to calm her down. Cinderpelt explained, but when I went to her den just now, she wasn't there, and she hadn't eaten the poppy seeds. I tried the elder's den in the nursery, but she isn't there either. She isn't anywhere in camp, Fireheart. Did anyone see her leave? I haven't asked yet. I came to tell you first. Then I'll get the apprentices to search and find out if Bluestar's not a kit, you know. Bluestar's not a kit, you know. The interruption came from Whitestorm, who had padded into the warrior's den in time to hear Cinderpelt's news. She might have gone on patrol. For all you know, other cats are with her. He spoke calmly as he bared his teeth in a yawn and settled into his nest. Fireheart nodded uncertainly. What Whitestorm said was sensible, but he would have liked to be sure. After the state Bluestar had been in that morning, she could be anywhere in the forest. She might even have gone to RiverClan in search of her kits. There's probably no need to worry, Fireheart reassured Cinderpelt, hoping he sounded more confident than he felt. But we'll look anyway and find out if any cat has seen her. Leaving the den, he spotted Fernpaw and Ashpaw sharing tongues near the blackened remains of the tree stump outside the apprentice's den. Quickly, Fireheart explained that he had a message for Bluestar, but he wasn't sure where she was. The 2 apprentices dashed off willingly to look for her. You go and ask if any cat has seen her, he suggested to Cinderpelt, who had followed him out of the den. I'll go up the ravine and see if I can pick up her scent. Might be able to track her. Privately, he didn't have much hope. While he had slept, clouds had covered the sky, and a thin rain was drizzling down. It was not good weather for following scent. Before he could leave, Fireheart noticed that Sandstorm was just returning to camp, along with Cloudpaw and Brindleface. All 3 of them carried fresh kill, which they went over to drop on the pile. Fireheart raced up to them, with Cinderpelt limping behind. Sandstorm, he meowed. Have you seen Bluestar? Sandstorm swiped her tongue around her mouth to remove the prey taste. No, why? She isn't here, mewed Cinderpelt. Sandstorm's eyes widened. Are you surprised? After what happened this morning, she must feel like she's losing control of her clan. That was so close to the truth that Fireheart didn't know how to answer. We're going out again, loud. We're going out again, meowed Cloudpaw. We'll keep a lookout for her. Okay, thanks. Fireheart blinked gratefully at his apprentice. The young white thyme Young white Tom raced off again, with the two warriors following more slowly. Brindleface paused to meow. I'm sure she'll be fine, Fireheart, as she left, but Sandstorm didn't look back. Fireheart's problems were about to overwhelm him, but then he felt Cinderpelt's breath soft against his ear. Don't worry, Fireheart, she murmured. Sandstorm's still your friend. You need to accept that she doesn't always see things the way you do. You don't either, Fireheart sighed. Cinderpelt let out an affectionate purr. I'm still your friend, too, she told him. And I know you've done what you believe is right. Now let's see what we can do to find Bluestar. By the time the sun set, Bluestar was still missing. Fireheart had tracked her as far as the top of the ravine, but after that, with the rain coming down more heavily, the scent was lost among the tang of charred branches and the musty smell of fallen leaves. Too anxious to sleep, Fireheart put himself on watch. The night was far gone, and the moon was setting when he spotted movement by the camp entrance. The last rays of moonlight picked out a silver-gray coat as Bluestar limped back into camp. Her fur was soaked, plastered to her body, and her head was low. She looked old, exhausted, and defeated. Fireheart hurried across to her. Bluestar, where have you been? The clan leader raised her head and looked at him. A jolt ran through Fireheart. Her eyes, faintly glowing in the dim light, were clear and bright in spite of her exhaustion. You sound like a queen scolding a kid, she rasped, an edge of humor in her voice. She jerked her head in the direction of her den. Come with me. Fireheart obeyed, pausing only to snatch a vole from the pile of fresh kill. Bluestar needed to eat, wherever she had been. When he reached Bluestar's den, his leader was seated in her mossy nest, washing herself with long, careful strokes. Fireheart would have liked to sit beside her and share tongues with her, but after their last encounter, he did not dare. Instead, he dropped the vole in front of her and respectfully dipped his head. What happened, Bluestar? He asked. Bluestar stretched her neck to sniff the vole, half turned away from it, and then began to gulp it down as if she had suddenly realized how hungry she was. She did not answer until she had finished. I went to speak with StarClan, she announced, flicking the last traces of vole from her whiskers. Fireheart stared. To Highstones? On your own? Of course. Which of this pack of traitors could I ask to escort me? Fireheart swallowed. Gently he meowed. Your clan are loyal, Bluestar. All of us. Bluestar shook her head stubbornly. I went to Highstones and I spoke with StarClan. But why? Fireheart was feeling more and more confused. I thought you no longer wanted to share tongues with StarClan. The old cat drew herself up. I do not. I went to challenge them. I wanted to ask how they could justify what they have done to me when I had served them all my life and tried to do their will, and to demand an explanation for the things that are happening in the forest. Fireheart gazed at her in disbelief, amazed that his leader had dared to challenge the spirits of their warrior ancestors. I lay beside the moonstone, and StarClan came to me, Bluestar went on. They did not justify themselves. How could they? There's no justification for what they have done to me, but they told me something. Fireheart leaned closer. What? They said that there is evil loose in the forest. They spoke of a pack. They told me that it will bring more death and destruction than the forest has ever seen before. What did they mean? Fireheart whispered. Surely there had been enough death and destruction already with the fire and the floods. Bluestar lowered her head. I don't know. But we must find out, Fireheart exclaimed, his mind whirling. Perhaps they mean the dog, but a dog couldn't do damage on that scale. And what about pack? Maybe they're talking about ShadowClan. You know how Tigerstar vowed to take revenge on us? Maybe he's planning an attack, or Leopardstar, he added, still trying to cling to his hope that Tigerstar had lost interest in harming his old clan. Bluestar shrugged. Maybe. Fireheart narrowed his eyes. He couldn't understand why she didn't want to work out the meaning of what StarClan had told her and make plans to stop the attack if it came. We have to do something, he insisted. We could set a watch on the borders, and we should increase patrols. He wasn't sure how he was going to do that with so few warriors. We need to make sure there's always a guard on the camp. When his voice trailed off as he realized Bluestar wasn't listening. She crouched motionless, her eyes fixed on her paws. Bluestar? The ThunderClan leader looked up at him, her eyes bottomless pools of despair. What is the point? She rasped. StarClan has decreed that death will come. A dark force walks this forest, and even StarClan themselves cannot control it, or will not. There is nothing we can do. A shudder went through Fireheart. Was Bluestar right that StarClan were not powerful enough to avert the doom that was coming? For a few heartbeats he almost shared his leader's despair. Then he raised his head. He felt as though he were clawing his way up from the depths of black water. No, he growled. I won't believe that. There's always something that a cat can do, as long as he has courage and loyalty. Courage, loyalty, and ThunderClan. Yes, Bluestar. Fireheart tried to put all the force of his belief into his reply. No cat but Tigerstar has ever wanted to betray you. Bluestar held his gaze for a moment before looking away. Her tail flicked wearily. Do what you want, Fireheart. It won't make any difference. Nothing will. Now leave me. Fireheart murmured a farewell. Backing away, he noticed the poppy seeds Cinderpelt had left earlier. Still lying neatly on a leaf, he nodded toward them. Eat your poppy seeds, Bluestar, he mewed. You need the rest. Tomorrow everything will look better. He took the leaf between his teeth and carefully moved it into Bluestar's reach. Bluestar gave a disdainful sniff, but as Fireheart left the den, he glanced back to see her bend over and look up the seeds. Outside, he gave his pelt a shake, trying to get rid of the creeping horror he had felt as Bluestar revealed the message of StarClan. His paws carried him instinctively in the direction of Cinderpelt's den. He would have to tell the medicine cat that Bluestar was back, and he wanted to discuss what his leader had told him. Only then did he remember that more than a moon ago, Cinderpelt had told him of a dream in which she heard the words pack, and kill, kill. Chapter 16. Cinderpelt could tell Fireheart nothing more, nor suggest what the evil in the forest might be. StarClan wouldn't repeat the warning if it weren't important, she meowed, her troubled blue gaze resting on Fireheart. All we can do is keep watch. At least Bluestar is back safely, Fireheart tried to encourage her, but it was poor effort. Both cats were aware of the shapeless, voiceless threat hanging over the clan they loved. In the days that followed, Fireheart did his best to set up a system of patrols that would give the clan ample warning if ShadowClan or RiverClan decided to attack. There were barely enough warriors for the regular patrols and sentry duties, and Fireheart felt his fur grow thin with worry as the season moved on. The rain gave way to crisp, dry weather, but there was a thin rim of frost on the ground each morning, and the remaining leaves dropped steadily from the trees. The brief recovery of the forest was over, and prey became scarce again. One morning, about half a moon after the confrontation with WindClan, Fireheart was about to lead out the dawn patrol with Brackenfur and Cloudpaw when Bluestar came padding from her den. I'll lead the patrol this morning, she meowed, and went to wait by the entrance to the camp. Bluestar leading a patrol? Muttered Cloudpaw. That ought to go well. Watch out for flying hedgehogs. Fireheart aimed a cuff at the side of his head, but he couldn't help feeling as surprised as his apprentice that Bluestar should start taking up clan duties again. Show some respect, he ordered. She's your leader, and she's been ill. Cloudpaw grunted, and Fireheart was about to join his leader when an idea struck him. Listen, Cloudpaw, you want to be a warrior, don't you? The white cat nodded eagerly. Well then, this is your chance to impress Bluestar. We'll take another apprentice as well. Go and find Swiftpaw. Cloudpaw's eyes lit up with excitement, and he dashed off toward the apprentice's den. Fireheart watched him go. He turned to Brackenfur. Can you get Longtail? He knew the pale tabby warrior would be pleased to have a chance to show off his apprentice's skills. He's due to go out on hunting patrol. You don't mind swapping duties with him, do you? No, that's fine, Fireheart. Brackenfur disappeared into the warrior's den, and a moment later Longtail appeared. The two apprentices joined their mentors, and all four cats padded over to where Bluestar was waiting. Her tail twitched. Sure you've got the right cats, Fireheart? She inquired acidly. Without waiting for a reply, she led the way out of the camp and up the ravine. As he followed the blue-gray she-cat toward the RiverClan border, Fireheart could almost imagine that the last few seasons had never happened, and he was still a young warrior going out on patrol without any of the responsibilities that troubled him now. But the fire-scarred forest reminded him that there was no going back. The frost was beginning to melt as the sun rose over the river, though the leaves still crackled beneath the cats' paws as they padded through the shadows. As they went, Fireheart tested the two apprentices on what they could see and scent, hoping to demonstrate their hunting abilities to their leader. They answered confidently, but Bluestar gave no sign that she had heard. The ThunderClan leader paused when they came within sight of the river and stood gazing at the opposite bank. "I wonder where they are," she murmured, almost too quietly for Fireheart to hear. "What are they doing now?" Fireheart did not need to see the sadness in her eyes to know that she was thinking of Mistyfoot and Stonefur. He glanced uneasily at the other cats to see if they had noticed, but Swiftpaw and Cloudpaw were sniffing at an old water vole hole, while Longtail was watching the movements of a squirrel high in the branches of a tree. After a few moments, Bluestar turned and followed the border upstream toward Sunning Rocks. Fireheart noticed that she kept casting glances into RiverClan territory, but everything was quiet. They saw no RiverClan cats at all. Eventually, Sunning Rocks came within sight. The smoothly sloping boulders seemed deserted. Then, as Fireheart watched, a cat climbed up from the opposite side and stood silhouetted against the sky. Fireheart stopped dead, his fur prickling with the sense of danger. Though he could not make out the color of her fur, there was no mistaking that aggressive stance, the arrogant tilt of her head, and her long, winding tail. It was Leopardstar. A couple of other cats had joined Leopardstar as the ThunderClan patrol drew closer. Fireheart recognized Stonefur, the RiverClan deputy, and the warrior Blackclaw. "Bluestar," he hissed, "what are RiverClan doing on Sunning Rocks?" But Fireheart felt his heart sink with dread when he saw the way Bluestar was looking at the RiverClan deputy. Not the challenging glare of a leader faced with enemy cats on her territory, but the admiring gaze of a queen who has seen her beloved kit become a noble warrior. Bluestar padded forward until she reached the base of the rock where Leopardstar waited. Fireheart followed. "What do you think they're doing?" Cloudpaw muttered indignantly behind him. "Sunning Rocks is ours." Fireheart shot him a warning glance to keep silence, and the apprentice dropped back beside Swiftpaw and Longtail, while Fireheart went to stand beside Bluestar. "Good day, Bluestar," Leopardstar meowed, her voice confident. "I've been waiting since moonset to see ThunderClan cats, but I had never hoped that one of them would be you." There was an edge of mockery in her tone, and Fireheart winced that the head of his clan could be scorned so openly by other leaders. "What are you doing here?" Bluestar asked. "Sunning Rocks belongs to ThunderClan," but her voice was low and unchallenging, as if she did not really believe what she was saying, or did not care. "Sunning Rocks has always belonged to RiverClan," Leopardstar retorted, "even though we allowed ThunderClan to hunt here for a while. But ThunderClan stands in our debt after the help we gave you at the time of the fire. Today we claim that debt, Bluestar. We are taking Sunning Rocks back." Fireheart's fur bristled with fury. If Leopardstar thought she could stroll onto Sunning Rocks without a fight, she was mistaken. Whipping around, he hissed, "Swiftpaw, you're fastest. Run back to camp and fetch reinforcements." "But I want to fight," Swiftpaw protested. "Then get back here fast." The apprentice dashed off into the trees. Leopardstar tracked him with narrow eyes, and Fireheart knew she must realize why he had gone. It was essential to hold off the battle for as long as possible. "Keep her talking," he muttered to Bluestar. "Swiftpaw's gone for help." He was not sure if Bluestar had heard him. She was staring at Stonefur again. "Well, Bluestar," Leopardstar challenged, "do you agree? Do you allow RiverClan the right to Sunning Rocks?" For a few heartbeats, Bluestar did not reply. As the silence stretched out, more RiverClan cats crept up to the top of the rock and emerged to stand beside their leader. Fireheart's heart lurched when he saw that one of them was Graystripe. His gaze locked with his friend's, and he saw in Graystripe's appalled face a message as clear as if the Grey Warrior had yelled to the skies. "I don't want to fight you." "No," Bluestar spoke at last, and to Fireheart's relief her voice was firm. "Sunning Rocks belongs to ThunderClan." "Then you'll have to fight us for it," growled Leopardstar. Fireheart heard Longtail whisper at his shoulder, "They'll make crow food of us." At the same moment, Leopardstar uttered a blood-curdling yowl and launched herself down the face of the rock at Bluestar. The two cats crashed to the ground, spitting and clawing. Fireheart sprang forward to help his leader, but before he reached her, a warrior crashed into his side, bowling him over and sinking his teeth into Fireheart's shoulder. Fireheart scrabbled against the river-clan cat's belly with his hind paws, desperate to break his grip, and slashed his claws at his enemy's throat. The tabby warrior let go and backed off, yowling. Fireheart spun around, looking for Bluestar, but she was nowhere to be seen. He spotted Longtail in the midst of a heaving mass of cats, but before he could do anything to help, he caught a glimpse of Blackclaw springing toward him. He managed to avoid the warrior's outstretched claws, and as the river-clan cat fell awkwardly, Fireheart sprang on him and bit hard into his ear. Blackclaw scrabbled on the ground, trying to escape Fireheart's grip. Fireheart raked his claws across his back, only to lose his hold as another cat barreled into him from the side. He went down and felt teeth meet his tail. Longtail was right, he thought desperately. They'll tear us into strips. Longtail was right, he thought despairingly. They'll tear us into strips. The ThunderClan cats were hopelessly outnumbered, and there had been no time for Swiftpaw to reach the camp and return with help. Long before reinforcements could arrive, the patrol would have been driven off or killed, and Sunning Rocks would belong to RiverClan again. Fireheart writhed helplessly, struggling for enough space to use teeth and claws. Suddenly the weight lifted as the cat lying across his legs was yanked away. He sprang to his paws to see Cloudpaw perched on Blackclaw's back. His claws fastened deep in the warrior's black fur, and the wild light of battle in his eyes. Blackclaw reared up on his hind legs, but he couldn't shake the apprentice off. "See, Fireheart?" Cloudpaw yelled. "Do it this way, it's easy." There was no time for Fireheart to answer. He spat an insult after the other warrior, who vanished wailing among the rocks. He threw himself into the whirling mass of cats around Longtail. Fireheart dragged one warrior off of him and suddenly came face to face with Brackenfur, as the younger warrior burst out of the trees. He gasped with surprise and gave fervent thanks to StarClan. Swiftpaw must have met the hunting patrol scouting near Sunning Rocks, as Fireheart had ordered after Graystripe's warning, and sent them along, bringing help long before Fireheart had dared to hope for it. Where's Bluestar? Where's Bluestar? Brackenfur called. "Don't know." In the moment's respite, Fireheart looked around for his leader. There was still no sign of her, though he caught sight of Leopardstar facing up to Whitestorm on top of a rock, a few fox lengths away. Longtail staggered to his paws, panting for breath as he leaned against the rock face. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead, and he had lost a strip of fur along his flank, but his lips were still drawn back in a snarl, and he followed Brackenfur willingly as the ginger warrior leapt into the battle. Fireheart was about to join them when he heard a voice calling out urgently above the noise of the fighting. "Fireheart! Fireheart!" He spun around to see Graystripe crouched on top of the nearest rock, a look of anguish on his broad face. "Fireheart, come here!" For a heartbeat, Fireheart wondered if this was a trap, and then felt ashamed of himself. His friend had avoided fighting him face to face. He would never snare him with a trick. Fireheart bounded up the smooth slope of the rock to Graystripe's side. "What is it?" Graystripe pointed with his muzzle toward the other side of the rock. "Look!" Fireheart peered over the edge. The rock sloped down more steeply there into a narrow gully. Bluestar was crouching almost directly below him. Her fur was ruffled, and she was bleeding from one shoulder. Coming along the gully on either side, cutting off any possible escape, were Mistyfoot and Stonefur. The RiverClan deputy slashed his claws at Bluestar without touching her. "Defend yourself," snarled the Grey Tom, "or I swear by StarClan I'll kill you." On Bluestar's other side, Mistyfoot crept closer, her belly flat to the ground. "Are you scared to fight us?" she hissed. Bluestar did not move, except to turn her head from one to the other. Fireheart could not see her expression from his vantage point, but he knew she would never be able to attack her own kits. "I had to tell you," Graystripe whispered beside Fireheart. "They'll call me a traitor, but I couldn't let them kill Bluestar." Fireheart shot his friend a look of gratitude. Graystripe had no idea the real relationship between Bluestar and these two RiverClan cats. His only motive was loyalty to his former leader. But Fireheart had no time to think for long about Graystripe's tangled loyalties. He had to save Bluestar. The RiverClan cats had advanced until they were almost touching her, their fur bristling and their teeth bared in a snarl. "Call yourself a leader," Stonefur sneered. "Why won't you fight?" He drew back a paw to bring it raking down over Bluestar's shoulder. At the same instant, Fireheart launched himself down the rock face. He landed hard in the gully, practically on top of Stonefur, forcing him away from Bluestar. On the clan leader's other side, Mistyfoot let out a screech of defiance and unsheathed her claws. "Stop!" Fireheart yelled. "You can't harm Blue Star. She's your mother." Chapter 17. The RiverClan warriors froze, their blue eyes wide with shock. "What do you mean?" Stonefur rasped. "Greypool was our mother." "No, listen." Fireheart bundled Bluestar against the rock face and stood in front of her. He could still hear the yowls and spitting of the battle on the other side of the rock, but suddenly it seemed to have nothing to do with the confrontation in this gully. "Bluestar gave birth to you in ThunderClan," he meowed desperately, "but she couldn't keep you. Your father, Oakheart, brought you to RiverClan." "I don't believe you." Stonefur drew his lips back in a vicious snarl. "It's a trick." "No, wait," mewed Mistyfoot. "Fireheart doesn't lie." "How would you know?" her brother demanded. "He's a ThunderClan cat. Why should we trust him?" He advanced on Fireheart, claws out, and the ThunderClan warrior braced himself for the attack, but before Stonefur could spring, Bluestar slipped out from behind him and faced the two RiverClan cats. "My kits!" Bluestar's voice was warm, and when she turned her head, Fireheart saw that her eyes were blazing with admiration. "You're such fine warriors now. I'm so proud of you." Stonefur glanced at Mistyfoot, uncertainty showing in his twitching ears. "Leave Bluestar alone," Fireheart urged quietly. The sudden yowling interrupted him. "Fireheart, watch out!" The voice was Greystripes. Fireheart looked up in time to see Leopardstar plunging down the rock toward him. Greystripe's warning gave him just enough time to scramble backward, so that her outstretched claws only raked his shoulder. Spitting, she flung herself at him, driving the breath out of his body as she hurled him to the ground. Fireheart gripped the RiverClan leader's neck with his front paws and felt her powerful hind paws raking at his belly. Pain stabbed through him, and he slashed out blindly, feeling his claws score through fur. For a few heartbeats, all he could see was Leopardstar's spotted pelt. His face was pressed into it, half smothering him, and he struggled to breathe. Suddenly, Leopardstar jerked her head back, and Fireheart lost his hold on her neck. Her stifling weight was lifted off of him. Scrabbling to his paws, he backed against the rock, ready for her to spring at him again. His head whirled with exhaustion, and he could feel blood pulsing out of a wound on his leg. Suddenly he wasn't sure that this was a battle he could win. He looked around for Bluestar, but she had disappeared, and so had Mistyfoot and Stonefur. The RiverClan leader crouched on the ground in front of him, breathing hard, bleeding from her neck and side. To Fireheart's astonishment, Greystripe stood over her, pinning her down with his front paws. "I had him," Leopardstar panted, almost incoherent with fury. "I heard you just now. You warned him." Greystripe released his leader so she could stagger to her paws. "I'm sorry, Leopardstar, but Fireheart's my friend." Leopardstar shook drops of blood from her golden tabby fur and glared at the Grey Warrior. "I was right about you all along," she hissed. "You were never loyal to RiverClan. All right, you've got a choice. You were never loyal to RiverClan. All right, you've got a choice. Attack your friend for me now, or leave my clan for good." Greystripe stared at her in dismay. Fireheart's breath caught in his chest. Was Leopardstar going to force him to fight his former clanmate? He knew that he didn't have the strength to beat a cat who was still relatively fresh, and much more than that, how could he lift a claw against his best friend? "Well," snarled Leopardstar, "what are you waiting for?" Greystripe glanced at Fireheart, his amber eyes filled with anguish. Then he bowed his head. "I'm sorry, Leopardstar, I can't do it. Punish me if you want." "Punish you?" Leopardstar's face was contorted in fury. "I'll claw your eyes out. I'll set you loose in the forest for the foxes to track down. Traitor!" A chorus of yelling drowned her threats. Fireheart looked up, almost despairing at the thought of more enemies to fight. He could hardly believe what he saw. A wave of ThunderClan cats were streaming over the rocks and down into the gully. He spotted Mousefur, Darkstripe, Sandstorm, and Dustpelt, and Swiftpaw leading the other apprentices. His message had gotten through, and help had come at last. Leopardstar took one look and fled. The ThunderClan warriors gave chase at once with furious yowls. Fireheart and Greystripe were left looking at each other. "Thank you," Fireheart mewed after a few moments. Graystripe shrugged and padded over to him. He was limping slightly, and his fur was torn and thick with dust. There was no choice, he whispered. I couldn't hurt you, could I? Fireheart drew himself up. As his head cleared, he realized that the sounds of battle were fading, and a heavy silence was gathering over Sunning Rocks, filled with the reek of blood. Come on, I've got to see what's happening. He turned and padded along the gully, aware that Graystripe was following close behind. Coming to the open ground beyond the rocks, he saw the RiverClan warriors retreating down the slope that led to the river. At the head of the patrol, Blackclaw launched himself into the river and began swimming toward the opposite bank. Brackenfur and Sandstorm stood nearby, and more ThunderClan cats crouched on top of Sunning Rocks, watching their enemies depart. Cloudpaw raised his head and let out a yowl of pure triumph. Bluestar padded after the retreating cats as far as the RiverClan border, her ears pricked with determination. Fireheart saw with a twinge of distress that she was following Mistyfoot and Stonefur. Now that you know the truth, we must talk, she called after them. You will be welcome in the ThunderClan camp. I will tell my warriors to bring you to my den whenever you want to see me. But both warriors turned away from her and stalked down to the edge of the water. Stonefur glanced back before he waded out into the river. Leave us alone, he growled. You're no mother of ours, whatever you say. Leopardstar was the last cat to retreat across the border. Look there, she snapped at her warriors, flicking her tail toward Graystripe, who was standing beside Fireheart. If it weren't for that traitor, Sunning Rocks would be ours again. He's no longer a member of RiverClan. If you catch him on our territory, kill him. Without waiting for any response, she spun around and limped rapidly toward the river. Graystripe said nothing. He stood as motionless as the rocks behind him, with his head hanging. Sandstorm padded across to Fireheart. What happened? She asked. She was bleeding from a scratch on her shoulder, but her eyes were clear and questioning. Fireheart longed to go back to camp and curl up in the warrior's den to share tongues with her, but he knew he had too much to do. Graystripe saved my life, he explained. He pulled Leopardstar off me. So that's why he can't go back? The pale ginger she-cat turned her head to watch the last of the RiverClan cats plunging into the river. Then she looked back at Graystripe, her eyes huge with concern. What is he going to do, then? She murmured. Sudden joy stabbed through Fireheart. Whatever Graystripe felt for his kits, if he could not go back to RiverClan, he could come home. Then the joy faded and anxiety twisted Fireheart's belly. That decision wasn't his to make. Would Bluestar now allow the Grey Warrior to come back to the clan he had left? And how would the other warriors react? Looking around for his leader, Fireheart saw her padding weirdly up the slope and went to meet her. Bluestar. She raised her head, and he saw that her eyes were puzzled. They hate me, Fireheart. Sorrow flooded over Fireheart. With his own worries about Graystripe, he had almost forgotten what his leader must be suffering. I'm sorry, Bluestar, he murmured. Perhaps I shouldn't have told them, but I couldn't think of what else to do. That's all right, Fireheart. To her amazement, Bluestar reached out and gave his shoulder a swift lick. I always wanted them to know, but I didn't think they would hate me for what I did. She let out a long sigh. Let's go back to camp. She showed no sense of triumph that ThunderClan had succeeded in defending their claim to Sunning Rocks. When she reached the place where her warriors were gathered, she said nothing about the victory, not even to congratulate them for fighting so well. Her mind still seemed fixed on her kits. Fireheart fell in beside his leader as she padded up the slope. Well done, he meowed to Cloudpaw as his apprentice leapt off the rock and landed neatly at his side. You fought like a warrior, so did all of you, he added, raising his voice as he glanced around, hoping to make up for their leader's indifference. Bluestar and I are both proud of you. Thanks StarClan, we managed to beat RiverClan off, mewed Brackenfur. No, thanks us, Cloudpaw put in. We did all the fighting. I didn't notice any StarClan warriors on our side. Bluestar turned her head at that and fixed an intent gaze on the white apprentice. Her eyes narrowed. Fireheart expected her to rebuke him, but her expression showed interest rather than anger. She gave a little nod, but said nothing. As the warriors began to move off toward the camp, Fireheart went to stand beside Graystripe. Bluestar, he meowed nervously. Graystripe's here. Bluestar's gaze flicked vaguely over the Grey Warrior. For a moment, Fireheart was afraid that her mind was drifting again, and she wouldn't even remember that Graystripe had ever left ThunderClan. Then Darkstripe shouldered his way forward. Get off our territory, spat at Graystripe, adding to Bluestar. I'll drive him off if you want. Wait, Bluestar ordered with a touch of her old authority. Fireheart, explain what's going on. He told her how Greystripe had warned him about Leopard Star's attack and pulled her away when Fireheart was losing the fight. He brought me to help you when Mistyfoot and Stonefur were attacking you, he explained, and I owe him my life, Bluestar. Please let him come back into ThunderClan. Greystripe looked at his former leader with a glimmer of hope in his amber eyes, but before Bluestar could reply, Darkstripe broke in roughly. He left ThunderClan of his own free will. Why should we let him come crawling back now? I'm not crawling back to you or any cat, Greystripe retorted. He turned to face the gray she-cat. But I'd like to come back if you'll have me, Bluestar. You can't take back a traitor, Darkstripe spat. He's just betrayed his leader. How do you know he won't betray you the first chance he gets? He did it for Fireheart, Sandstorm protested. Darkstripe snorted contemptuously. Bluestar fixed a cold look on him. If Greystripe is a traitor, she meowed, with all the ice of Leaf Bear in her voice, then he's just the same as the rest of you. The clan is full of traitors, so one more won't make any difference. She whirled on Fireheart, power and strength seeming to flow back into her body. You should have let Mistyfoot and Stonefur kill me, she spat. Better a quick death at the claws of noble warriors than a life dragged out in a clan I can't trust. A clan doomed to destruction by StarClan. There were gasps from the other cats as she spoke, and Fireheart realized that few of the clan had any idea how distressful and despairing Bluestar had become. He knew there was no point in trying to argue with her now. Does that mean Greystripe can stay? He asked. Stay or go, whatever he likes, Bluestar responded indifferently. Her flash of strength ebbed, leaving her looking more exhausted than ever. Slowly, not meeting the troubled gazes of any of her warriors, she padded away in the direction of the camp. And that's where we'll stop for tonight. Ooh. I hope everyone enjoyed listening, and I hope you have a good evening and a good night. Till next time, my friends, take care.